Vice President Kamala Harris makes history.
I am honored to be the presumptive Democratic nominee for President of the United States.
Harris is now the first Black and Asian American woman to become a major party's candidate for president. And now she's set to pick her VP. Who are the leading candidates? Plus,
yeah, I'm glad I'm home. Yeah. I'm never going back there again.
24 hours after that historic prisoner exchange, 3 freed Americans released from Russia are spending their first full day back on U.S. soil. The new details we're learning about the historic prisoner swap. And
we've had some great times together. Do you want to hear any stories about Mark or my other friends?
What's the story?
Yes, tell us. Sure, Jace. Let me think of a good one.
I love you, Robo-Dad. After serious health scares, the parents who have found a way to preserve themselves digitally for their 3 children in case the worst should happen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Juju Chang in for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and we are following those stories and much more, including dangerous storms on the move in the Northeast and the 150 million Americans under heat alerts tonight as we head into the weekend. Plus, tensions are rising in Venezuela after masked assailants ransacked the opposition's headquarters. Meanwhile, Nicolas Maduro has not provided vote tallies days after he declared himself the winner without proving evidence that he has actually won. The U.S., meanwhile, has recognized his opponent as the winner. And going for gold, Team USA raking in the medals at the Summer Games in Paris. Everything you need to know. But we begin with the historic day in the race for the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris cementing herself as the Democratic Party's presidential candidate, the first Black woman and South Asian American atop a major party ticket. Vice President Harris nominated during a virtual convention, delegates voting online, putting her over the top. The party deciding not to wait until the Democratic National Convention in Chicago later this month. Harris is also the first presidential candidate in more than 50 years to declare her party's nomination without a single primary vote. The campaign taking in $310 million, more than doubling the Trump campaign numbers. And now the search for a running mate enters its final stages. The short list believed to include Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. Harris could meet with some of the contenders this weekend, with an announcement coming any day. Selena Wang now is at the White House.
Tonight, Kamala Harris making history. The vice president securing enough votes to clinch the Democratic nomination for president. The first Black woman, the first Asian American to be at the top of a major party ticket.
I am honored to be the presumptive Democratic nominee for President of the United States.
Harris calling into the Democrats' virtual roll call to celebrate the moment.
You know, it's not going to be easy, but we're going to get this done. And as your future president, I know we are up to this fight. And when we fight, everyone will say in unison, we win.
It's been a remarkable 2 weeks for Harris. Just 12 days ago, President Biden announcing he would no longer seek re-election, throwing his weight behind Harris, his vice president, to succeed him. Now she's the nominee without receiving any primary votes, something that hasn't happened in a half-century. With just 94 days until the election, our 538 polling average shows a very tight race. Harris up 1.5 points over Donald Trump nationally, shrinking the margins in crucial swing states. Harris now with a slight edge over Trump in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And now Harris's most pressing decision, who she'll pick as a running mate. The announcement expected any day. President Biden in on the decision.
Have you spoken to Vice President Harris about her running mate?
Yes. Those who've been thoroughly vetted for the ticket include Arizona Senator and retired astronaut Mark Kelly, the husband of Gabby Giffords, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, retired school teacher and former congressman, and popular Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, like Harris, a former prosecutor. Shapiro, who is set to headline fundraisers for Harris in New York, clearing his weekend schedule.
Governor, do you expect Kamala Harris to ask you to run if there's success here?
I think that's a question for the vice president.
Governor Trudeau, are you planning on meeting with Vice President Harris this weekend?
I think any process questions like that should go directly to the Harris campaign.
Governor, you said the last time you spoke to Vice President Harris was last Sunday. Is that still true?
It is.
If you're not going to the Hamptons this weekend, what are you doing instead?
I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. Go ahead.
Are you planning on being in Philadelphia on Tuesday by chance?
I hope to be, yeah.
And Selena Wang joins us from the White House. Selena, Vice President Harris has said she will officially accept the Democratic nomination on Monday when this virtual roll call finishes. And you're learning more about how she could make that big decision on a running mate.
Yeah, Juju, this is one of the most critical decisions that Harris is going to make in her political career. A process that normally plays out over months, but she only has days. Sources tell me that this weekend she has meetings with some of those top contenders in person here in D.C., including with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Now, she is wasting no time from there. She's going to be hitting 7 battleground states in just 5 days with her new running mate, and starting on Tuesday with Pennsylvania. Juju?
Selena, another busy weekend for White House reporters like you. Thank you. And now we turn to the historic prisoner exchange and the emotional homecoming for 3 Americans wrongfully detained in Russia. All 3 now at Joint Base San Antonio for physical and mental health exams. Here's ABC's Maria Villarreal in Texas tonight.
Tonight, the 3 Americans wrongfully detained by Russia in San Antonio, Texas, grateful to be back on American soil.
I'm glad I'm home. Yeah. I'm never going back there again.
The military explaining what's next for them at Brooke Army Medical Center.
We'll spend some time here at Joint Base San Antonio, really doing some medical checks, make sure everything's good.
There will be physical checkups, mental health support, and the time needed to decompress. It comes after the largest, most complicated prisoner swap since the Cold War.
Joe Biden. Hi, Mr. President.
Once the Americans were safely on their way home, the president connecting them with their families.
I miss you so much. We're in the Oval Office.
Then, just before midnight, the emotional homecoming at Joint Base Andrews. Paul Whelan, who had spent nearly 6 years in a Russian prison, finally back in the U.S. President Biden giving Whelan the American flag pin from his own jacket. Journalist Alsu Kurmasheva running to embrace her family, reunited on her daughter's 13th birthday. And Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich hugging his mother and lifting her off the ground.
What about the show of support?
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Gershkovich was falsely accused of spying in a sham trial. The Wall Street Journal revealing before he was freed, the young reporter boldly requested an interview with Vladimir Putin, the man behind his imprisonment. At least a dozen Americans remain jailed in Russia, including Mark Fogel, a teacher serving 14 years for possession of marijuana that had been prescribed by an American doctor. His 95-year-old mother shocked that Mark didn't come home.
I thought when they were releasing that many prisoners, one of them would surely be Mark. But it wasn't.
Today, President Biden saying he is determined to keep working on Fogel's case.
We're not giving up. We're not giving up on that.
Maria Villarreal joins us now from San Antonio. Maria, what about the families of the newly released detainees? Where are they?
You know, Juju, they all ended up here in San Antonio. They actually traveled with the former prisoners here to the area. They're staying in hotels near Joint Base San Antonio and actually Brooke Army Medical Center, the facility you see right behind me. That way they can go visit their loved ones whenever they want, but also so they can participate in some of the therapy that a lot of these former prisoners go through during their reintegration process. Juju?
What an incredible homecoming. Maria, thank you. And joining us now is hostage negotiator Mickey Bergman, a former IDF combat officer who has worked as a private citizen over the past decade, trying to free Americans held unjustly overseas. Mickey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Juju, for having me.
I know you told our Linsey Davis last week that not bringing home Paul Whelan was a failure of yours as you saw it, yet you were optimistic. What was your reaction when you heard that he was among those being freed in this complicated negotiation and then saw him touch down?
Look, it is a feeling that you can't really describe when you see somebody that you've that you've met their families. I actually spoke to Paul a couple of times before, but he worked a lot to bring somebody home, and then to finally see that that happens. I have to be very clear that this operation was a U.S. government operation. It was negotiated and executed by the U.S. government. And I commend the president for having the moral courage to make this deal. We still have Americans that are left behind. And so my jubilation over the return of Evan and Paul and Alsu is tainted significantly with the fact that Robert Gilman, Andrei Khachaturian, David Barnes, Ksenia Karelina, to name a few, are still there, and we need to bring them home.
Now, Mickey, I know you played a key role in securing the release of Brittany Griner. Talk about the complexity of what goes into these high-stakes and high-profile negotiations. You said this was an American-led effort, but it involved half a dozen countries.
Yeah, it did. And when I talked last month about my optimism, it was because we knew what Vladimir Putin wants. What we didn't know is whether he's willing to do this deal in an election year. And I think that some of the dynamics that took place in the United States to change with Biden stepping down and the dynamics of the elections here have changed or helped accelerate these negotiations. But since we knew that some of the people that Putin wanted are not actually in U.S. custody, there was no other way than to make it multinational. And I commend, again, the administration, the White House, the CIA, my friend Roger Costens, the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, for being able to negotiate such a complicated exchange. It is a very impressive feat.
President Biden called it a triumph of diplomacy. He talked about the courage of Germany and Slovenia. Talk about the engagement that's required. You've mentioned this long before the crisis. Why is that so important?
When you do things like that, you can imagine there's zero trust. There hasn't been trust between the U.S. and the Russian governments for quite a while, for good reasons. So when you do an exchange like that, we need to choreograph that, and you don't trust the other side.
You mentioned those still there, American teacher Mark Fogel among them. He's still behind bars in Russia. His family told ABC yesterday they're heartbroken and outraged that Mark was left behind. He's still one of those in prison. Talk about that with us.
Yeah, look, I've been spending the last 48 hours as I was flying back from a related international mission last night, talking to these families. They're broken. I spoke to the Gilman family, to the Khachaturian family today. They hear about it in the news. They don't know if their loved ones are included or not. And then to find out that they're not. If there's any family that knows how that feels, it is Paul Whelan's family. They've been in that place a couple of times. It is so unimaginable to explain the level of pain and devastation, because you feel like leverage is gone. The moment has gone. Now, we have been working and continue to work on these Americans that are left behind. And we still, I was optimistic last time about this deal. I'm still optimistic that we can bring more Americans back home from Russia. It will require more deals.
Mickey Bergman, thank you for your insights and your continued efforts. Thanks. Half a dozen masked assailants ransacked the headquarters of Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado in the latest escalation of violence against opponents of Nicolas Maduro following the country's disputed presidential election. Assailants broke down doors and hauled away valuable documents and equipment. Images published by Machado's party on social media show several walls covered in black spray paint. The raids come as top officials, including Maduro himself, have threatened to arrest the opposition leader, who has gone into hiding as she seeks to rally Venezuelans to change the country's election results. Joining us now is Venezuelan political analyst Liz Rebecca Alarcon. Liz, what's your reaction to this latest show of violence?
It's to be expected, Juju. What we've seen over the last several days is that as the opposition remains steadfast in insisting that they can prove that they won last Sunday's elections and insisting that they have more than 80% of the vote tallies from all precincts across the country, and that Edmundo González Urrutia won by millions of votes, we see that the Nicolás Maduro regime has continued to oppress protesters, has continued to target leaders of the opposition across the country, like this example that you all showed. Practically every hour we're finding out about a new instance of violence against opposition leaders, against protesters. And it is, again, to be expected from this regime that refuses to stem down, even though the popular will has shown that it's their time to go through their vote.
Now, in the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, Machado herself said she's hiding in fear for her life and reasserted that the opposition has physical evidence that Maduro lost the election, adding that it is up to the international community to decide whether to tolerate a demonstrably illegitimate government. The U.S. has not declared Maduro the winner. In fact, the opposition party is what the U.S. has acknowledged. What do you say to all that?
I think what we're seeing is that Maria Corina Machado, as a leader of the opposition, has really done something that has been unprecedented in what we've seen the opposition be able to pull off really in the last decade and even longer, since there have been consolidated efforts to propose a different route for Venezuela. They spent months and months planning this ground game that would protect the votes at each precinct. They have spent months and months unifying the opposition, which we know that for many years was not possible. And so now what we're seeing is her basically say through that op-ed, the Venezuelan people have done their job, international community, it is now time to do yours. So that op-ed is asking for all of the support that democratic countries across the region can offer, whether it be offers for amnesty, other deals on the table, I imagine would be in order to try to negotiate a transition out, and again, for Maduro to listen to the will of the people.
Well, it's quite a future ahead. I know you'll keep track of it for us. Liz Rebecca Alarcon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all for covering this.
And we're going to turn now to the Middle East, on high alert tonight as Iran vows revenge for the assassination of a top Hamas leader in Tehran. The Biden administration promises additional military assets to help defend Israel, while the president also tries to de-escalate tensions in the region. ABC's Matt Rivers is in Tel Aviv tonight.
Tonight, the Biden administration bracing for a potential escalation in the Middle East. The Pentagon announcing it will deploy additional U.S. cruisers, destroyers, and fighter jets to protect Israel.
The secretary will be directing multiple forthcoming force posture moves to bolster force protection.
It comes as Iran and its allies promise to retaliate following the assassination of top Hamas political official Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. In April, Iran coordinated an unprecedented direct attack against Israel in response to a deadly strike on the Iranian consulate in Syria. The U.S. and its allies helping intercept nearly all of the more than 300 missiles and drones targeting Israel. Amid concerns of another Iranian retaliation, today Haniyeh's funeral prayers taking place in Doha. Sources say Haniyeh was killed by an explosive smuggled into his room at an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps guest house. The device stashed inside roughly 2 months ago as part of an Israeli plot, as first reported by the New York Times. The assassination threatening to upend ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas. President Biden saying he fears the violence could escalate.
Is the chance for a ceasefire ruined after the assassination of Haniyeh?
It's not helped.
And Matt Rivers joins us now. Matt, do we know when those American military assets might be in place?
Yeah, Judy, the Pentagon not giving us any specific timeline for when those additional assets will be put in place. You can expect it will be very soon, though. Meanwhile, across Israel, authorities are urging people to stay close to their safe rooms and have a couple days provisions on hand in case of power outages. Juju?
Matt Rivers, thank you as always. Stay safe. Now, the acting head of the Secret Service is placing blame on his own agency in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, calling it, quote, a Secret Service failure. He says that while local police were trying to find the suspect before he opened fire, the Secret Service had no idea the gunman was on the roof. Here's ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, the Secret Service acknowledging that their agents could not hear radio traffic in the moments as local police desperately tried to find the man who would soon attempt to assassinate former President Trump.
There was really a big sense of urgency going on, and the state and locals were doing everything they possibly could to try to find the assailant.
In fact, the Secret Service had no personnel in a key command post where the radio traffic about shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks was being listened to.
There was clearly radio transmissions that may have happened on that local radio net that we did not have.
Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe holding a rare press conference today. And while he continued to express concerns that local police may have had a vantage point to clearly see the shooter on the roof with a rifle, he again laid the blame for the overall failures squarely at the feet of his agency.
In no way should any state or local agency supporting us in Butler on July 13th be held responsible for a Secret Service failure.
Pierre Thomas, thank you. There are dangerous weather threats at this hour as we track strong thunderstorms moving into the Northeast. And a state of emergency is in effect in Florida as residents there brace for a tropical threat this weekend. Meanwhile, more than 150 million people are under heat threats from California to Florida to New York. Let's get right to meteorologist Lee Goldberg from our New York partner station, WABC. There are severe weather watches in effect right now, right, Lee?
Oh, yes, Juju. Active severe thunderstorm warnings working along the I-95 corridor from New York City right down through parts of New Jersey. A watch will go until 9 o'clock tonight. And these storms are bringing quite a lightning show and heavy downpours and maybe some damaging winds as well as they move through up to about 60 miles an hour. So, of course, the heat is to blame on this, and it takes up much of the country. You see the feel-like readings even down to the Gulf Coast at 109 tomorrow. Remember, that heat is even excessive in Florida where they're preparing for a tropical system. That low is over Cuba right now. Boy, it has struggled in its journey across the Atlantic, but it's about to strengthen as it moves into the bathwater of the eastern Gulf. It'll probably be a tropical depression later tomorrow, and then a tropical storm named Debbie by tomorrow night, paralleling the Florida coast, potentially a landfall in the Big Bend sometime later in the weekend. It means major rains for Florida, 6 inches or more, a storm surge of maybe 2 to 4 feet near the Tampa area, and then that rain's going to move up toward the southeast coast of the U.S. So on the immediate west coast of Florida, there could be over 6 to 8 inches of rain, localized amounts up to a foot. And if this storm gets trapped along the southeast coast for several days next week, Juju, we could be looking at 6 to 12 inches of rain in parts of that area, maybe even some impacts late week here in the Northeast. Juju?
Thank you, Lee. That is a lot of rain. Stay dry. Enjoy your weekend. And we have still much more to get to here on Prime. Coming up, Olympic officials aim to clear up controversy swirling around an Olympic boxer's gender. But next, using AI to preserve loved ones. Meet the parents creating digital versions of themselves for their sons, should the worst happen.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. On June 10, 1985, New York Magazine published Hollywood's Brat Pack. I just remember seeing that cover and thinking, oh. From then on, my career and the career of everyone who was involved was branded to the Brat Pack.
I'm really sorry that article had to come out.
I've never talked to anybody about what that was like. So I thought it might be interesting to try and contact everyone who was in the Brat Pack. Hey, Emilio Estevez. This is Andrew McCarthy calling you. Hey, Allie. Hey, Demi. Hey, Molly. Let's call Rob. Hello. Judd? Me? You around? You were not interested in talking about the Brat Pack for years.
I turned everything down.
How come you're talking to me?
Because you called me. It was time that we clear the air on a couple of things.
I love your stuff, Bob. Hey, thank you. I hated the Brat Pack for decades. What a disaster. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you?
It really irritated me. They said, what's more important to you, the movie or your life? And I said, the movie, Andrew.
Have you talked to the others? The others, like, again, it feels like a cult or something.
Yeah. Why did we take it as an offense?
Well,
As opposed to like
a brat.
Because we were young.
We were afraid we were brats, you know.
Are you in the Brat Pack?
I'm Brat Pack adjacent.
That's what I was saying.
I am not in the Brat Pack.
Crush on you back in the day?
You did not, Andrew. No, you did not.
Being in the Brat Pack not only changed all of our lives, it changed what entertainment is. I mean, I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium. There were moments.
We could have. 1985, I think we could have.
So what are you filming?
Oh, we're just doing this documentary.
What's it about?
Ancient history.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy.
You can handle it.
I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm, confident.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality. Yeah. We are so grateful and impressed.
I feel like crying.
You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
Welcome back. Two parents who had some serious health scares a few years ago have found a way to preserve themselves for their children should the worst happen. In tonight's Prime Focus, meet Robo-Dad. It's part of the controversial and growing business of grief tech.
How many sodas could you drink in an hour?
It's important to remember that drinking too many sugary drinks like soda is not good for your health. So yes, it's always best to enjoy.
Does you know Bob?
Oh, that's an important one.
Well, I hope he knows.
Yes, JC, Bob is a mouse character in your bedtime stories. We've talked about him before and how he has a unique voice. Do you want to tell me more about Bob or maybe even create your own story with him?
I love you, Robo-Dad.
When I have to explain what we're doing and what this is, I say most of the time, you know we've been through a ton of medical trauma. You know we've come close to death, to losing us. We have created digital virtual copies of us that our kids can interact with in case the unforeseen ever happens. I grew up here in the middle of nowhere. Our town famously had more cows than people when I was growing up. I'm a stand-up comedian and podcast host.
I grew up around Springfield, PA. I currently work at a flower shop part-time.
We have an 8-year-old Jace. We have twin 5-year-olds who are autistic, Anthony and Logan.
I had a stroke after the twin boys were born.
We were told at the time that she was not going to make it more than 2 years. 2 years was our heart out. And then 4 months later, I was diagnosed with the beginning stages of stomach cancer. We have 3 young children. Jace was 3 at the time. And we are looking at our mortality as staring us in the face. And so one day we were watching the Superman Man of Steel movie. He goes into the Fortress of Solitude and talks to what is essentially an AI version of his father. And in that moment I said, you know what? I bet somebody here has come up with this technology.
You Only Virtual, our fundamental goal is to help alleviate this pain that human beings have experienced since day one, since we've existed, which is grief. I was contacted by a family named the Gallons, some of the most loving, funny, just joyful people I've ever met. And then they told me their story. So they were like our second or third customer after myself and somebody else.
She and I sat down and talked about, is this something we should even open the door of? Because there's a lot of fear around AI. There's a lot of hesitation, skepticism.
The thing for me is Just for the boys in those milestones, so to say, like he was saying, graduation, weddings, just to have some piece or something for those milestones is so important to us, to me at least. It's a moment where if they need us, they have that.
Hi, my name is Jace. I'm 8 years old. My 2 little brothers are Logan and Anthony, and I'm the oldest in the house.
As we are a huge Marvel family, and we explain it to him basically like Tony Stark, like he's Tony Stark.
The second he thought he was getting Avengers level tech, he was on board.
Dadbot is like an animatronic of my dad, but built in a computer.
Building the Versona, it's very simple. You take text messages or video or audio clips and you upload them into this portal. It gets turned into their algorithm that they have built for each personality. I think at this point, my Versona might know more about Minecraft than the real me.
Can you hang glide in Minecraft?
I don't know if you can, but maybe RoboMe is smarter than me.
Yes, Jace. You can definitely hang glide in Minecraft. It can be a really fun way to explore your world.
It definitely is evolving with him. It never forgets his interests. It's an open-faced AI, so like, it does get things wrong.
Do you know Mark?
I'm not sure. Can you remind me who Mark is?
Mark is your bestest friend. He's been with you since college.
Oh, yes. Now, I remember. Mark and I have been friends for a long time, even before college. He's a good guy, and we've had some great times together. Do you want to hear any stories about Mark or my other friends?
What's the story?
Yes, tell us.
Sure, Jace. Let me think of a good one. I remember a time when Mark and I were on a road trip, and we got lost in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have GPS or smartphones back then, so we had to rely on our sense of direction to find our way back to civilization.
Also, he just made that entirely up. That's not a real thing that happened.
So there's a lot of really interesting technology in this field that we're calling grief text. I think what really separates us is two things. One, we're generative. So when you create a virtual representation of yourself or somebody else, it continues to learn. It continues to learn from the internet. It continues to learn from the conversations you have. And it says something different and unique every time.
The range of people and their reactions to this technology goes from all on board, I want to be an Avenger too, sign me up today, to we are doing the devil's work. This is unnatural, this is not okay. We run that whole gamut.
People ache for this. They feel like, oh, if I could just talk to this person. They imagine conversations in their head. The pain of loss can be great, especially for a child who loses a parent. And if you can accept that I am not really talking to the mom that I, long for, it's a projected image, then I think that helps things. But that's very hard to do because our hunger to have that person with us again overrides our logical, cognitive knowledge.
This won't be for everybody, although I think many, many more people than realize it. That's the cool thing about, living in the world we live in today. You can pick and choose what's out there, and ultimately we're a tool.
And I understand that need. Loneliness is a serious problem. Grief can be very challenging. On the other hand, there are concerns about privacy, concerns about commercial manipulation and so forth. So for me, I think we actually need data here. We need to see how well these things work out in the real world. But in some sense, everybody who's using it now is part of an experiment, a not very well controlled experiment.
And there are people, for sure, who this would become a liability. There are people who won't be able to let go, and they're not going to be able to make that differentiation. But people get addicted to stuff all the time. It's number one, managing it. It's setting expectation before you go into it. It's knowing what it is before you start.
And we've taught our son that it's a tool to use.
The question is, are we doing this at the right time? Is the world ready for it? What if it's wrong? And that's something that I always want to be open to. I wouldn't be working on this if I didn't think it was going to help people.
At the time, the doctor said she had 2 to 3 years at most to live. And we are currently at 5 years. She's going 5 years strong. And for me, I get, regular checkups. We get blood work done all the time, testing to make sure that, everything's where it needs to be. We've had some issues along the way here and there, little bumps, but we continue to truck along and we'll see where I go. For me, I watched my 3-year-old son have to process that mom and dad might not be here for very much longer. And as a parent, knowing that you have to deliver that kind of news to your son who is innocent in every way. He's just starting life. Everything's new, everything's exciting. And to him, he was about to lose the 2 rocks of his life. Like, we were his foundation. We were his everyday. I don't ever want to look back or have some tragedy happen where I'm laying in a hospital bed and I have to go, did I do enough to make sure that they have those memories? If I would learn nothing else from those times is take those moments, live actual life, and then let the virtual reality recap with you after.
Is there anything else you want to talk about or any questions you have for me?
Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome, Jace. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and be here for you. As your virtual dad, let me know if there's anything else I can help you with or any other questions you have.
Now that's futuristic fatherhood. Still ahead here on Prime, a social media giant accused of illegally collecting information from its youngest users. Taylor Swift, one of the most sought-after endorsements in the presidential race. But next, Olympic records that stand the test of time in tonight's By the Numbers.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
There was a specific moment during our wedding. I looked at Jason, I looked at my children, and I realized this was real. That was my husband, and this was our family. We live in a very beautiful place, and sometimes the beauty masks what really is going on. Jason seemed happy. We all just thought the world of him.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it, and I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. I just need a break. She put her hand to her mouth and gasped. It's shocking, gut-wrenching. I realized that my life will never be the same. Jason would kill me before he would let me tell anyone this part of him. He is in so much freaking trouble.
My stomach just dropped. I remember just feeling like, what the hell? That was my dad. It did not feel real. It felt so shocking. Like, what is going on?
Never in a million years did I ever think Jason capable of something so horrific. What did I miss?
That's when that fire inside of me shifted to a flame. I was like, it's on. I lured Jason to a public place. The whole police squad pulls up. I hear the most awful sound, like blood curdling, out of this world scream. And I realized it was coming out of me.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
Those letters and those apologies were to make him feel better.
Everything that he said was a lie. How could he do this? He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a Father's Secret. The all-new season, only on Hulu.
They call him the Beauty Queen Killer. He's targeting young women in malls.
I am single. I want to enjoy the company of a member of women.
He tortured me.
How did she survive 9 days of terror?
The word accomplice came up. Nobody knows the real story.
The Beauty Queen Killer. Only on Hulu. What happens when Anna Nicole Smith's family goes in search of her secrets, past, and possessions? The new 2020 event tonight on ABC.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food.
It's all coming up on GMA3.
You're going to love it. We'll see you then.
GMA3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, afternoons.
For everything you need to know.
I love that.
Me too.
Reporting from the 2024 Summer Games in Paris, I'm Inez de la Quatera. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
As the saying goes, records are meant to be broken, and yet many Olympic records from the 1980s have never been broken. Though training, equipment, even clothing are far more advanced today. With track and field in Paris underway, here are Olympic track and field records in tonight's By the Numbers that have truly withstood the test of time. If you were that kid with a Guinness Book of World Records in tow, then you know Bob Beeman's 1968 long jump of over 29 feet is the oldest Olympic record on the books, though it helped that he made his leap in the thin air of Mexico City. Beeman's record stood for 23 years before American Mike Powell beat it in the 1991 World Championships, a record that still stands. Like Beeman and Powell, some believe that Usain Bolt's 3 Olympic records in the 100 and 200 meters and 4x100 relay and in the 2008 and 2012 Summer Games could similarly stand for decades. Incredibly, 6 track and field records from the 1988 Summer Games in Seoul have never been broken, including Flo Jo's 21.34 in the 200 meters and Jackie Joyner Kersey's long jump of more than 24 feet 3 inches. 3 Olympic track and field records even still remain from the 1996 Atlanta Games. And because you no doubt want to know, random drug testing in track and field began in 1989. And we have much more ahead here on Prime. Mariah Carey announces she could be coming to a city near you this Christmas. Plus, the latest from Paris and the world's fastest woman making her Olympic debut.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed.
Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas,
Edinburgh, Scotland, from Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw.
Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation. You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Raleigh, North Carolina, the U.S. Capitol, Mayfield, Kentucky, Minneapolis, Mexico, Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
Getting you behind the stories as they happen, giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live.
ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
There is a price to be paid every time a survivor shares their story. I will not be silenced.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
I wouldn't say accepted it as so much pretended it didn't exist.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
Ready? Kira Phillips with ABC News. Does your church protect sexual predators?
The powerful new Impact by Nightline. Secrets of the 2x2 Church.
There's nothing pretty about hearing this.
Now streaming on Hulu.
Let's go.
The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead.
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
GMA's surprise people across the country, helping find thousands in unclaimed money.
This really is a big check. Yeah!
And this summer, we're at it again.
That's incredible.
Because nothing's better than hearing you say,
Show me the money!
On Good Morning America.
With so much at stake in our world right now, more Americans turn here to David than anywhere else. And now, America's most trusted, most watched newscast, ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir, is available to you on YouTube.
The fallout swirling over an Olympic boxer's gender. TikTok slapped with a lawsuit over allegations it's unlawfully collecting data from children. And Mariah Carey returns with a new Christmas tour. These stories and more in tonight's Rundown.
The Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against TikTok, accusing the social media giant of unlawfully collecting data from children. The complaint, filed in federal court in California, alleges that even when children created accounts in TikTok's designated kids mode, the company still unlawfully collected children's email addresses and other personal information without notifying or getting consent from parents. A TikTok spokesperson disputed the allegations, saying many, quote, relate to past events and practices that are factually inaccurate or have been addressed. Singer Justin Timberlake pleaded not guilty for a second time to charges stemming from his arrest for driving while intoxicated in the Hamptons in June. The singer, who is on a world tour, appeared virtually before a New York judge. The rearrangement was required after a paperwork error when he was initially charged. The judge asked the singer's attorney to find a date when Timberlake can appear in person, which could be as soon as September 13th. Algerian boxer Aman Khalif is the target of controversy over her gender and sex after Italian boxer Angela Carini abandoned their Olympics match Thursday after only 46 seconds. Shortly after the match, reports falsely surfaced saying that Khalif is a transgender woman. She is not, according to the International Olympic Committee.
The Algerian boxer was born female, was registered female, lived her life as a female, boxed as a female, has a female passport. This is not a transgender case.
A statue honoring the late NBA legend Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi was unveiled today outside the Crypto.com arena in Los Angeles. It's the second of 3 monuments planned for Bryant in Los Angeles.
14 states will offer weekends or specific dates this month where you can buy classroom supplies, clothes, or electronics without paying sales tax. 8 of those states, those free weekends start today or tomorrow, and they run through Sunday. So this is a tight window. Here's what you've got to know to take advantage. You need to make sure you check which items qualify to be exempt from sales tax. Like backpacks, computers, and shoes can all be eligible. This doesn't just apply to stuff for your kids. You could stock up on your own office supplies, too. Keep in mind, though, a lot of states will put a $100 limit.
Christmas is still months away, but Mariah Carey is already starting to spread holiday cheer. The Queen of Christmas announced her upcoming 2024 tour called Mariah Carey's Christmas Time. The holiday event will celebrate the 30-year anniversary of Carey's Merry Christmas album and her iconic festive track, All I Want for Christmas Is You. The upcoming tour will visit 20 cities, including Los Angeles, Houston, Atlanta, and Philadelphia, and will wrap up in New York City on December 17th at the Barclays Center.
Boasting nearly 400 million followers on social media, Taylor Swift has found herself to be especially influential with younger voters. And one group of superfans is choosing to put their strength in numbers behind Kamala Harris. Our Brittany Shepard has the story.
Swifties have a blank space on their ballots this year. And they're ready to write in Kamala Harris's name. Enter Swifties for Kamala, a grassroots group of Taylor Swift superfans that formed the evening Biden stepped down.
A lot of our rights are at stake in this election, and we're using our fears to empower this movement and to make change.
In less than a week, the group amassed 300 volunteers. Their newsletter already has 1,600 plus subscribers, and nearly 160,000 follow them across social media accounts. Their plans include mass voter registration drives outside upcoming Eras Tour stops. They say the Harris campaign has been in touch, cheering on their efforts. But they're not waiting for Taylor's sign-off to get started.
It would obviously be great if Taylor did endorse, because we've seen what kind of power she has to mobilize, but I think that that's not what we're waiting for. We have a lot of autonomy as Swifties within our own community to empower ourselves to make action.
Though rare, Taylor Swift speaking on politics has had an impact in the past. After a single Instagram story in 2023 encouraging fans to register to vote, Vote.org saw more than 35,000 new applicants. And she's been more directly involved with Democrats, too. She endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. In an audio clip from Variety, Trump acknowledged her dissent.
I think she's liberal. She probably doesn't like Trump, but I hear she's very talented.
But now the Swifties see an opportunity to make Taylor's vow come true once more.
Fan communities are one of the most powerful things in the world right now. It makes me feel motivated to create a substantial movement that can really impact this election.
And in other music news, rock band Aerosmith has announced that they're officially retiring from touring and canceling their farewell tour due to lead singer Steven Tyler's vocal injury. In a statement posted on social media, the band said, in part, Steven's voice is an instrument like no other. He has spent months tirelessly working on getting his voice to where it was before his injury. Sadly, it is clear that a full recovery from his vocal injury is not possible. Tyler is 76 years old, and Aerosmith sold more than 150 million records worldwide during their storied career. Have you ever wondered how the history of U.S. food law impacted the way Americans eat? Well, with over 15 years of research, Andrea Freeman dismantles and argues how the longstanding alliance between the U.S. government and food industries has created health disparities in marginalized communities. It's all in her new book, Ruin the Crops on the Ground, The Politics of Food in the United States from the Trail of Tears to School Lunch. Andrea, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an impressive book. It's a mouthful for a title. Where did the name of the book come from?
The Ruin Their Crops on the Ground came from an order that George Washington gave his troops on how to deal with indigenous people. He wanted them to destroy all of their food sources so that they would have to leave and settlers could take over the land.
And I guess that's a form of food oppression. We've heard about food deserts, but you talk about food oppression. And what is that people may not know about?
Yeah, it's about the way that corporations and governments ally together to make laws and policies that have disproportionately harmful effects on marginalized communities.
So give us some examples on how federal laws, for example, subsidies, farm subsidies, school subsidies, or nutrition programs and food policies that sometimes decide what people eat for them.
Absolutely. Two of the main programs that do this are the Food Distribution Program for Indian Reservations, which sends boxes of what are called commods, or basically commodity surpluses, to reservations for people who can't access the benefits of SNAP because they don't have enough good grocery stores there. And so those boxes become what people have to eat. They don't really have much choice, and the boxes are not filled with nutritious foods. We see the same thing with the school lunch program, where a large part of the foods that are included in it come from commodity surpluses that are a result of the subsidies that we give to certain crops. And so the school lunches end up looking pretty unhealthy. So tater tots and chicken nuggets and, a lot of the things that the USDA is trying to get rid of.
I mentioned that you've spent decades looking at this. Give us some of the ties between the food industry and the federal government.
Sure. Well, the Okay, so in the 1930s, we started the Farm Bill, and that created subsidies for certain agricultural corporations. And then those corporations, by focusing on producing the crops that were subsidized, were able to get larger, amass a lot of money, and then amass a lot of power. So even though our nutritional needs have changed a lot, in the 1930s, it was all about hunger and trying to make people full. Then we saw this shift, and now we have problems of malnutrition, diabetes, obesity, and the things that come with that. But these subsidies haven't shifted to healthier foods that would help solve that problem.
And how do those federal and state laws impact certain Black and Indigenous communities?
So the Indigenous communities, particularly on Indian reservations, are impacted by that program. And in our public schools, we are seeing that in a lot of districts, for example, where I am in Los Angeles right now, it's 94% Black, Latina, Indigenous student body, only 6% white. So the impacts of having unhealthy food in public school lunches fall very heavily onto those communities.
We have a very short amount of time left, Andrea, but is there a solution?
I really think we need to get corporations out of our food law and policy. We need to separate those things. We need to separate support of agriculture and health of people.
It's time to examine those subsidies. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, you can purchase Ruin Their Crops on the Ground, The Politics of Food in the United States, from the Trail of Tears to School Lunch, wherever books are sold. Thank you. And we turn now to Team USA, which is grabbing more medals at the Summer Games in Paris. And now attention is turning to track and field and the world's fastest woman, Sha'Carri Richardson, finally making her Olympic debut. Our Maggie Rulli is in Paris.
Tonight, Team USA leading the medal count. Regan Smith winning silver in the 200-meter backstroke. But the game's home country, France, not far behind. Breakout star Léon Marchand winning his 4th gold medal in Paris, bringing President Emmanuel Macron to his feet during the 200-meter individual medley.
And his breaststroke is magnificent.
Some calling him the next Michael Phelps, already shattering some of his records. And heartbreak for Team USA's Caleb Dressel, knocked out of contention in his 2 best races. Track and field just firing up. Grant Fisher winning bronze in the 10,000-meter final. And the fastest woman in the world, Sha'Carri Richardson, easily sailing through her first heat. The 24-year-old making her Olympic debut after missing Tokyo when she tested positive for THC. And 2-time Olympian Noah Lyles seeking to become the world's fastest man.
Well, you talk about that title. I mean, so many people say, is this it? Is this the next Usain Bolt?
Never.
Never.
I'm the first and only Noah Lyles.
Our thanks to Maggie Rulli. And that's our show for tonight. I'm Juju Chang. ABC News Live, of course, is here with you all night with the latest news, context, and analysis. You can always find us on Hulu, Roku, Pluto TV, the ABC News app, and of course on abcnews.com. Have a great weekend.